Chapter 5. Millie awoke feeling groggy. She was laying on a cot with a very comfortable pillow under her head. She seemed to be in the corner of a medical room. There were random charts here and there, an examination table in the middle of the place, and a couple of workstations up against the walls. She didn't have the slightest idea on how long she was out. Across from her, on the other side of the room, was a desk with a familiar doctor sitting there. He was rubbing his hands through his hair in irritation while looking at his computer screen. Millie tried to sit up but felt sore. She moaned in discomfort. The doctor twirled in his chair and faced Millie. My, you're awake, Dr. Glad cheered, fixing his hair instantly. Phenomenal! Where am I? Millie asked, still trying to get her bearings. Yes, of course, going through the list of questions, the doctor replied, listing the questions off with his hand. Where am I? How much time has passed? Am I all right? And those answers, Glad interrupted. You're in my lab. About, he consulted his watch, 2.5 hours have passed, and you are completely fine. Anything else you want elaborated on? Does everyone hurt come through your lab? Absolutely not, Glad answered, seeming to take a bit of offense, although Millie really couldn't tell. Dr. Glad seemed very, extra in everything he said and did. It was tough to take him seriously. Most just go through the medical tents above. Tents in this weather? Outrageous! Above? Millie questioned. And why am I here? There's a very decent-sized facility under Missionary Ward, and you're here because there was a decent chance that your wound was pretty serious, Glad said, and Millie gulped. But it's fine now. You had some fractured ribs, but those are all patched up. She looked down at herself and realized some things. She wasn't wearing her jacket or boots, but everything else she had on was the same. And she felt a cozy warmth in the room, a first besides being curled up in her blanket at the barracks. She did, however, feel a cool spot on her ribs where she took a beating. You have some bandages wrapped around you to keep some pressure on those ribs of yours, and to keep a cool pack secured, Dr. Glad explained. You can remove all of that in 2 to 3 days, but most likely you'll be sore for some time. No eternal bleeding or lasting injury, which is quite fantastic if I do say so myself. It took a minute for Millie to process the information. She looked over at the examination table. Why am I not on that? You were on there for a moment while I patched you together, but a metal table is too uncomfortable to rest on, so I gave you my cot, Dr. Glad answered. You sleep here? Yes, I know. Strange to sleep in your study, but I'd be damned if I had to sleep in the barracks with the other personnel on station. I'm sure the warden has similar accommodations for herself. I feel like I'm getting a special treatment, Millie stated. She never really liked being treated special. Not entirely true, Dr. Glad countered. Your wound did give me a bit of concern, and I had more gear here. The only specialty was the cot, really. But why? Millie felt like she was picking teeth. Glad shrugged. I'm a generous man. Millie nodded, saying she wasn't going to get any further. She did like Dr. Glad, though, and was generally curious about him. I like your hair, she complimented. The doctor rose his eyebrow, a bit surprised by the comment. Finally! A woman with class, he yelled. Besides my good wife, of course, he quickly added. Millie smiled and asked, what are you working on? She wasn't really fishing for anything. It just felt nice to talk to someone in a normal environment. Well, as normal as this could be. Glad sighed. I'm trying to write a letter to my daughter. Her birthday's coming up, you know. I'm just struggling with the approach. I can't be professional and dry, but I can't be all lovey-dovey because she hates that. He threw his hands into his hair, scuffling his hair in annoyance. The madness! He shrieked, and Millie chuckled at his performance. I'm sure she would at least appreciate the thought, Millie said. Yes, but it's a whole mess, Dr. Glad countered. I decided to name our daughters after flowers and our sons after trees. My wife went along with it. What is wrong with us? What? Millie was thrown off by the out-of-nowhere comment. I love my kids, don't get me wrong. I have 3 beautiful daughters and 2 amazing sons. But naming them after plants? Are you serious, doctor? It was tough for Millie to keep a straight face. Glad reminded her of her father, and that kind of ruined the mood for her. She missed her family. What's going to happen to us? She finally asked. This question seemed to get the doctor back to reality. He gave a long, heavy sigh. I'm not 100% sure, Millie. To my knowledge, I have no restrictions in telling you what I know. Right now, you are involved in a test project to create the perfect team of soldiers. I don't believe this is going to last years or anything. At the moment, each group will be participating in 5 matches against one another. I assume we'll use the data of those matches to proceed down another road. But those plans are changing all the time, and I know sometimes they don't keep me in the loop. Why was I picked for this? Millie asked. The short and honest answer? They picked people who wouldn't be missed, Glad said with a bit of pain in his expression. Oh, Millie whispered. Pretty much what Gorge said, and that was depressing. You are truly a lovely girl, Millie, but I think it's time to head back, Glad replied. Wait, Millie quickly said. One more question. The doctor nodded, interested. Okay, shoot. What exactly is your role here? Besides being quite the good-looking and professional doctor, he said with more than enough cheer in his voice, I work with a group of others in R&D, fine-tuning items for the project. You like it? Glad smiled. Let's just say I want to see my family again. Come on, I'll escort you to the elevator. I'm sure your friends are more than worried about you. Millie nodded and didn't protest. Millie put on her boots and jacket and was ready to go. The halls they took leading to the elevator had a modern feel, with the glossy white colors and lights. They passed other staff members and an armed guard or two. All paid Millie and the doctor no mind. They reached the elevator and the heavy, thick metal doors slid apart and they entered. The elevator didn't have any buttons like the ones Millie was used to, but a moment later, it started to ascend. Half a minute passed, and the doors opened to what Millie was used to, a snowy, depressing landscape. Best of luck, Millie, Dr. Glad said. He waved as she disembarked. Boca! Right, she replied, a bit confused with all the different words he used. That's a question she should have asked him. The doors slid closed, and Millie noticed that it blended completely into the wall. If she didn't just come out, she would have never guessed there was a door there in the first place, much less an entire facility right under her feet. She started to mosey her way back to the barracks. She opened the door and was hit with a blast of heat and music. One man nodded to her in greeting as she entered, but everyone was focused on Sly, whom was in the middle of the barracks playing a song on his right saxophone. People around him were clapping or making other noises to the beat. Sly finished his song and looked up towards the entrance. Who just walked in? Not waiting for a response, he said. Millie? Okay. Song for Millie. Let's go. The song started with a slow-paced melody followed by a fast-paced chorus. It did sound pretty good. Is this supposed to match my personality? Millie whispered to herself. You're spunky at times, Gorge remarked from over her shoulder. You seem to be looking much better, too. Not a dangerous shade of pale, at least. Oh, thanks, she said sarcastically. Gorge smiled. How'd the visit go? I got patched up, at least. She rose her shirt to reveal the bandages. Gorge nodded in approval. So, they were never completely broken. Millie nodded. At least that's what the doctor said. Your thoughts on him? He's a pretty nice and funny person, Millie replied, and Gorge nodded. Oh, he did tell me some useful information that Sly might be interested in, and maybe you might be too. Interesting, Gorge said and made a motion to Sly, who was still playing a song for Millie. He nodded, but Gorge wasn't too sure if that nod was to him or in the beat of the music he was playing. Sly wrapped up the song a minute and a half later and announced he was done for now. He made his way over. Nice to see you feeling better, Millie, Sly said. Thanks, Millie replied in a cheerful tone. No sarcasm there, Gorge grumbled. Sly laughed and slapped Gorge on the back. So, what's up? Millie went over everything she saw in every part of her conversation with Dr. Glad. When she was talking about why they were here in the 5 matches, Sly rose a brow at Gorge and the other man shrugged. Millie paid no mind to it, though. She wrapped up her story and there was a moment of silence as the men pondered her words. It sounds like the good doctor may have a morality issue about what's going on here, Gorge noted. Well, he was talking to a little girl about this. No offense to you, Millie, Sly added. None taken, Millie replied. Morality aside, Sly continued, the goal is to make a perfect team. And I bet that team isn't going to consist of a ton of people, Gorge added. He looked concerned, but added in a bit more of a cheerful tone. The layout is pretty interesting. At least, what's under our feet. Sly nodded in agreement. So, did I miss anything? Millie asked. Hammerburst, they both said instantly. What? The man's a freak, Gorge muttered. But who is he again? Millie asked. He's a fat, bald guy, Sly clarified and Gorge rose a brow. And he's the leader of Squad 8, Sly added. The main point is that we saw his match, Gorge interjected. And we saw what his squad consisted of. More like a harem instead of a squad, Sly commented. What's a harem? Millie asked curiously. Not the point, Gorge answered. Not the point? Sly stammered. That's exactly the point. The man's a freak. Others looked over at Sly, questioning his outburst. He waved them off as if it was nothing. Kristen also heard some comments directed at the girls of his squad in the showers. I'm telling all the women here, stay far away from that man. Millie shuddered at Sly's words, then asked Gorge, Isn't Illis a part of that squad? Is she? He asked, then paused. She does have a unique beauty to her. Why would that matter? Let's just put it this way. Sly jumped in. The only men in Hammerburst's squad is himself and some boy. That's it. Just stay away from that squad. That's all there is to it. Millie nodded, but the chill she felt wouldn't leave. Now, Sly continued with a yawn. I know you just got back, but let's get back out there and get some food. I bet you haven't eaten since this morning. Well, you might be right about that, Millie admitted. People were starting to move out of the barracks, probably with Sly's suggestion in mind. What time is it? Who knows the exact time, Gorge answered, but I'm too damn tired for this. Oh, please, Sly chided. But it is early evening, Millie. Oh, but you're not coming? Millie asked Gorge. Nah, it's a good chance for you to get to know your commanding officers some more, Gorge replied. I'm out. And with that, he slantered off to his bunk. What's with him? Millie asked. Sly shrugged. What can I say? The age is getting to him, and he chuckled to himself. Come on, let's get going. The giant Amon was waiting by the entrance. We heading out? I haven't seen you in a minute, but yeah, fighting off starvation has taken my interest, Sly replied. Millie just rolled her eyes, and Amon joined them. On the way, Amon explained that he had been to the training course. Apparently, this training course was outside one of the walls, similar to the arena. There was a man in uniform flanked by 2 guards serving the meal when Millie's group got to the mess hall. The meal that the man plopped into Millie's wooden bowl was a brown liquid with what she assumed was a variety of vegetables in it. Sly saw her disgusted look. Well, at least it's hot soup. Is it soup? She questioned. Was Sly's response and shrugged. Wonderful, Millie responded bleakly. The soup didn't look appetizing, and the taste wasn't too great, but it was hot, so she could at least appreciate that. They joined Omar and Kristen at their table. They exchanged greetings and went on with their meal. Gorge couldn't make it? Kristen asked. Millie shrugged. I guess he was tired. I made the comment that it was because of his age, Sly chimed in. Isn't that man supposed to be in his early 20s? Kristen asked. He is? Omar blurted out. Yikes! Attacking the man when he isn't present? Sly shook his head. Didn't you start this, though? Millie shot, and Amon nodded in agreement. I, at least, had the decency to make the comment when his back was turned, but still present. Sly shot back, and Millie rolled her eyes yet again. You'll get used to that, Kristen told Millie. I've barely known him for a week. The eye-rolling comes with his personality. Eye-rolling? Sly said incredulously. A couple of them chuckled at that. The chuckle quickly died when a new face approached them. A pretty backwards performance today, if I do say so myself. The newcomer was a white-skinned blonde girl with brown eyes, who was probably a couple years older than Millie, most likely in her late teens. She also had a scar on her left cheek. Sly shrugged as his response. Although, what would you expect from a bunch of rats? The girl continued. She was flanked by 2 people, most likely from her team. What is this? The high school bully squad? Sly asked in a nonchalant way. You looked better in the red suit, she replied, ignoring the quip. This caught Sly's attention. I pray I don't, but do I know you? Shay Eisen, the girl stated, leader of Team 7. They just make anyone leader, huh? Sly jabbed. So I see, Shay jabbed back. Kristen grinned at that. That doesn't answer my question, Sly continued. Do I? But Shay had already walked off. What's up with that? Kristen asked. Later, Sly said coldly. He definitely looked a bit ticked off. This seemed to kill the mood at the table. They finished their meals in mostly silence and left back to the barracks. The barracks only had a few people walking around when they arrived. People seemed to be taking more time outside, Kristen commented. But why? Millie asked, then muttered, It's cold out there. It's tough to quench the mind of its curiosity, Sly told her. Well, maybe you can quench my curiosity, Kristen said. How come you were letting that girl get to you? That is a fascinating question, Amon chimed in. It's unsettling that she knows me, but I can't place my finger on where I know her, Sly admitted. Do you think she was just messing with you? Omar asked. Nope. The red suit remark was dead on, Sly explained. I used to go out to the clubs and other gatherings with my sax, wore a red suit to go along with it, made a decent name for myself, although my wood carving skills helped out a little bit. And what was that decent name you made for yourself? Kristen asked with a smile. Huh? Sly? He frowned with a bit of confusion. I didn't have a fancy nickname or anything. Kristen shrugged, but Millie was getting impatient. So why is Shay getting under your skin? She asked. 1, Sly said. I don't recognize the name or her for that matter. 2, she clearly has an interest in me. He grinned. Kristen rolled her eyes. Oh, please. And 3, Sly was trying to add some suspense. Why would a girl like her be here? Amon finished. Sly clapped his hands together. Exactly. So, none of that really matters, right? Millie asked. Not necessarily. There are only, for the most part, 3 groups of people here. Outlandies, plain old criminals, and orphans. I don't think she fits the bill on any one of those. Why? Millie questioned. A personality, Amon answered. Her being here isn't a coincidence, Sly muttered. You think someone's out to get you? Kristen asked. You may be suffering from a case of paranoia. Maybe so, Sly admitted, but nothing a good night's rest can't solve, and he walked away, muttering to himself. Millie looked over at Omar and Amon. Omar shrugged. He can be weird sometimes. I think that goes for all of us, Amon said. Right, Millie muttered. Was Sly's concern valid, or was their leader starting to lose his edge? Millie was getting more questions than answers as her time passed at the ward. This made her question more than once about her future, if she even had a future anymore.